chapter 29. And we are going to look down through, hopefully down through chapter 31, verse 10, to get through this second portion of this. But we saw last week, of course, Jacob having to essentially get out of town because Esau's wearing out. And because of his stealing of the birthright, being blessed to his father, and deceptions that he has carried. And we see him essentially the first time taken out, leaving off on his own, and being a little bit worried and concerned, and uncertain of his future and what's going on. And he laid his head down there on a rock. Of course, we saw Jacob's ladder. We know the story very well. Angels moving up and down, and him seeing God there at the top of it, and God revealing to him the importance of making sure that God is not on the back burner, but on the forward burner or the front burner or whatever, leading the charge, not just kind of tagging along for the ride, not just there as a presence. So a much more real version of God in Jacob's life. We finished up with him last week through verse, the last part of chapter 28 there. Then we pick up with chapter 29, and Jacob has now went from Beersheba and journeyed down closer towards Haran. And now he's going to spend some time dwelling in the homeland of his grandfather Abraham. Okay, and as we look at chapter 29 of Genesis, we're going to see some instances in Jacob's life that are a little precarious, a little peculiar. Some of the things that he kind of has to go through here through chapter 29. So while dwelling in the homeland of Abraham, we're going to see God bless Jacob here with a family. Now we're going to read down to the first 14 verses here of chapter 29, and then kind of go back in and look at a few things. But as we see, verse 1, then Jacob went on his journey and came into the land of the people of the east. Okay, so after now Jacob has kind of reevaluated, realigned his sights. God's no longer kind of just a presence around him. He's leading and directing. We see that Jacob now is going to go on his journey. Right? This is now his journey that he's going to take. Verse 2, and he looked and behold a well in the field. And lo, there were 3 flocks of sheep lying by it, for out of that well they watered the flocks, and a great stone was upon the well's mouth. And thither were all the flocks gathered, and they rolled the stone from the well's mouth, and watered the sheep, and put the stone again upon the well's mouth in its place. And Jacob said unto them, my brethren, whence be ye? And they said, of Haran are we. And he said unto them, know ye Laban the son of Nahor? And they said, we know him. And he said unto them, is he well? And they said, he is well. Behold, Rachel's daughter cometh with the sheep. And he said, lo, it is yet high day, neither is it time that the cattle should be gathered together. Water ye the sheep, and go and feed them. And they said, we cannot until all the flocks be gathered together, until they roll the stone from the well's mouth, then we water the sheep. And while he yet spake with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she kept them. And it came to pass, when Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, and Jacob went near and rolled the stone from the well's mouth, and watered the flock of Laban's, his mother's brother. And Jacob kissed Rachel, and lifted up his voice, and wept. And Jacob told Rachel that he was her father's brother, and that he was Rebekah's son. And she ran and told her father. And it came to pass, when Laban heard the tidings of Jacob his sister's son, that he ran to meet him, embraced him, and kissed him, and brought him to the house. and told Laban all these things. And Laban said to him, Surely thou art bone of my bone, thou art my bone and my flesh. And he abode with him the space of a month. So Jacob now is on his journey, and he arrives in the land, at a well in the land just outside of Haran. Okay? And if you see down through verses 14 there, the account that takes place, he sees, as he's there, he sees the well, he sees some shepherds who were there who can't get the stone away from the mouth of the well. Okay? They're unable to roll the stone away. And they needed to roll the stone away, obviously, because their sheep are in need of water. Okay, it's time for them to be watered. And he kind of sees this whole thing kind of happening in front of him. And while in the midst of all this, Jacob learns that Laban was in good health, doing well. He was traveling to find. And he also learns that his daughter, Rachel, would soon be in the area where the well is at. She's approaching the well to water her sheep too. And as an act of courtesy, of course, and Jacob probably kind of maybe show off a little bit, right? As an act of courtesy here, he rolls the stone away and takes the flock and waters Laban's flock. And then in the midst of all this, we saw verse 11, 12, whatever it was, he turns and sees Rachel and walks over to her and kisses her. And as he's giving her a kiss of greeting, tears are just rolling down his face. He tells Rachel who he is, and then she immediately runs back and tells her father. And delighted to see Jacob and entertains him as a guest before the month. That's kind of what happens during those 14 verses. But in verse 11, kind of to look at for a second, we see again, let's read verse 11, and Jacob kissed Rachel and lifted up his voice and wept. Why do you think Jacob here? What are the reasons for some of his tears? Why does he react in this way? Okay, right. Realize he's at the right place. Any other reasons?
She had onions for dinner.
I had onions for dinner. True.
I sometimes cry when I realize that he was right and I was wrong.
That's what I kind of gathered from this is that this has been, if you go and look at the distance Jacob has traveled, it's been almost 500 miles. Okay, it's in between 400 and 500 mile journey. That he went on, God sent him to go here. And we know a 400 or 500 mile journey at this time would have been difficult. It would have been a really long time. Probably a lot of uncertainty in the midst of it. And when he gets to the end of the journey, he sees Rachel and he sees where he's at, realizes he asks these guys where he is, where I'm supposed to be. He realizes that God answers his prayers immediately upon his arrival. Right? The pressure of wondering if the journey was going to be worth it, the pressure of wondering if the payoff at the end of this extensive walk that he's taken is going to be what God had promised him, or what he even thought or hoped. He had probably weeks and weeks and weeks to think about what it was going to be like when he got there. And as Miranda said, the prayer was answered, and he's overfilled here with joy and just probably a realization of the sovereignty of God. Right? God said something that's been probably weeks beforehand, and he sees it come to fruition. And the journey was profitable and was exactly as God had intended for Jacob. So we see him here just over-enthused with probably relief and joy, and maybe even a little bit of, man, why haven't I been listening to God all along? Why did it take me so long to get to this point? So he's probably just flooded with just tons of emotion. That he grabs this girl that he'd never seen before, and gives her a kiss and hugs her, and he's just kind of overjoyed with realizing what God has done for him. Okay? We get down to verse 15. So Laban then, of course, says, come on in, realizing that his kinfolk, come on in and stay for a month. And we get down to verse 15, down through verse 20, and we see some other events kind of taking place here with Jacob. Verse 15 down to 20, and Laban said unto Jacob, because thou art my brother, shouldest thou therefore serve me for naught? tell me, what shall thy wages be? And Laban had 2 daughters. The elder name was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah was tender-eyed, but Rachel was beautiful and well-favored. So Laban here, we'll start for just a second. Laban offers to hire Jacob, have him work for him. And we see Laban probably realizes and knows that Jacob kind of has his eye on Rachel a little bit, so he asks him here, knowing, probably well aware that Jacob's going to ask for Rachel's hand in marriage. He's allowing Jacob to set his own pay, right, for working for him. He set his own wages for working for him. And Jacob agrees. Verse 18, Jacob loved Rachel and said, I will serve thee 7 years for Rachel, thy younger daughter. So he tells him that Laban says, let me give you a job. I'll let you work for me. Can I pay you, or what's the wages going to be? He said, I'll work here for 7 years if you will allow me to marry your youngest daughter, Rachel. Verse 20, Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed unto him but a few days for the love he had to her. So Jacob agrees to work for 7 years. And 7 years, of course, you think about that, of course, 7 years is a long time. It's not, but it is, right? For, him to show up somewhere, and the reason being him to work 7 years is essentially just so he can marry this man's daughter. 7 years was a pretty big commitment. It's a long time for him to be working and doing whatever Laban wanted him to do. But as we saw there in verse 20, that they seemed to Jacob that those 7 years were just what? Just a few days, right? He loved her so much and was so excited about being able to marry her that it seemed to be just a few days to him. The love for Rachel gave him so much happiness that it essentially just flew by. Go back to verse 17 for a second, because every time I read this story, something about this just kind of makes me, it kind of tickles me a little bit. Because in verse 16 we see that Leah was the older daughter and Rachel was the younger daughter. And we see that the Bible describes Rachel as being what? Very beautiful and well-favored.
Yeah.
We get a description of Leah, and her description is what? She's sweet. Right? She's sweet, but she's not what Rachel is. And I think it's just kind of tickles me every time that when Moses was writing this, that God gave him how am I going to describe Leah? Well, she ain't a looker, but she's really, really sweet. Is kind of what happens here. But so it kind of sets the stage for what's getting ready to happen in a second. Now I'm sure that, in somebody's eyes, Leah would have been very beautiful. No beauty is an eye to behold. But it is described here that she had a tender-eyed, very sweet little girl, but she's not the little girl her sister was. So then we get to verse 20, right? So he's going to serve 7 years, and it seemed to him, but just for a few days. Now, around verse 21, and Jacob said unto Laban, so from verse 20 to verse 21, 7 years passed. Okay? And Jacob said unto Laban, give me thy wife, for my days are fulfilled, that I may go in unto her. So Laban here has offered to hire Jacob, knowing that he wanted to marry Rachel. So after the 7 years is up, Jacob comes in, as well he should have. All right, Laban, it's been 7 years. I've done what you've asked me to do. Been a very good worker. Probably, I would imagine, went above and beyond what Laban wanted him to do. Probably did even more so. He was a very, very, very good worker. Probably took care of a whole lot of things. And the day has finally come for him to marry his beloved, right? Marry Rachel. So, as we see verse 21, he comes to Laban and says, I've done the work. Verse 22, and Laban, gathered together all the men of the place and made a feast. So they're going to have a marriage. We know how the custom is at this time. Anytime we have a marriage, we're going to have a big feast, everything together. It's going to be a big party. Everybody's going to have a great time. Going to enjoy this marriage. Going to enjoy this moment of these two people coming together and have this big party here for them to celebrate what's going on. So he brings all the men together and has this feast. Verse 23, and actually, let's go back to verse 21 for a second. As Jacob comes in and asks for Rachel, and this is something that I did. I pulled this from the book, this book, and then a couple other commentaries. Because I was unsure about this, but he comes in. The verse 21 is there because apparently Jacob was technically already married to Rachel, but there had been no consummation of the marriage yet. Okay, and it was. I read that it's just a pull-out sentence in this book, and I read a couple of the other commentaries, and I guess that I couldn't really make a whole lot of sense of why they think they're already married here, but I guess just the way it's worded when he sees her and he comes in especially verse 21. He says, give me my wife. He's already referring to Rachel as his wife, so they kind of say that maybe they intended they had already been married. They just hadn't come in and consummated it yet because of the way verse 21 is written. So that's, maybe that was another reason why it was no big deal for Jacob to wait 7 years. It seemed like it was nothing to him, for him to work that long. Again, that was just a pull-out sentence that I saw in this, and I was unsure that was the case maybe. But the way that you read it, I guess it's potentially it could have already technically been married. They just hadn't consummated the marriage. Of course, another Jewish custom is a pretty big deal. Kind of a whole big thing that they do with that. But anyways, so that's now we have this feast together that Laban puts together for them, and it comes to pass here, verse 23, that in the evening. It came to pass in the evening that he took Leah his daughter and brought her to him, and he went in unto her. And Laban gave unto his daughter Leah Zilpah his maid for a handmaid. Let's keep going. Verse 25, it came to pass in the morning, behold, it was Leah, and he said to Laban, what is this that thou hast done unto me? Did I not serve thee for Rachel? Wherefore then hast thou beguiled? So we know the deception that kind of takes place here when it comes time for the evening, time for them to consummate the marriage. Laban says it's not customary to give the younger daughter in marriage before the older daughter in marriage. So he sends Leah to Jacob. And if you look at verse 26, and Laban said, it must not be done so in our country to give the younger before the firstborn. Okay? So he gives Leah because it's customary for the oldest daughter to be married first, even though that is not the terms that Jacob and Laban had agreed on. Okay? By no means. So he's obviously upset about this, he's distraught about this, and he goes to Laban and, what have you done to me, why have you done this to me, so on and so forth. And we get down into verse 27, after he has told him the reason why he did what he did. Laban follows up with, fulfill her week, and we will give thee this also for the service which thou shalt serve me yet 7 other years. So he tells him that he can have Rachel as a wife as well, but he has to serve 7 more years of labor. That was the price for Rachel. So Laban gave Rachel to Jacob at the start of 7 years of labor, and Jacob obviously loved her more than he loved Leah, his first choice, obviously. Verse 29, Laban gave to Rachel his daughter Bilhah, his handmaid, to her maid, to be her maid, and he went in also unto Rachel, and loved also Rachel more than Leah, and served him yet 7 other years. Okay, so we see that Jacob, because of his love for Rachel, went ahead and served the 7 more years, and of course he had a greater and deeper affection and love for Rachel than he did Leah, because that was the one he had spent all this time working for anyhow. All right? Now, nevertheless, in the midst of all this, Jacob still starts a family with Leah. God opens up her womb and allows her to have children because she was the unloved one. All right, look at verse 31. When the Lord saw Leah was hated, right? We see Leah was the replacement here. She was, she's also, think about Leah here, also put in a really tough situation. Okay, it's not just Jacob and Rachel. Laban put Leah in a very difficult situation as well. And there's obviously going to be resentment and hard feelings there for probably forever. But nevertheless, Jacob started a family with Leah, and because God saw that she was unloved and hated the way that she was, that he opens up her womb and allows her to have children. We see at the end of verse 31, in the midst of this, though, that Rachel was what? Was barren. So Rachel was unable to give or desire any children at this time. All right? Look at verse 32. And Leah conceived and bare a son, and she called his name Reuben, for she said, surely the Lord hath looked upon my affliction. Now therefore my husband will love me. And she conceived again and bare a son, and said, because it was her that I was hated, he hath therefore given me this son also. And she called his name Simeon. She conceived again and bare a son, and said, now this time will my husband be joined unto me, because I have borne him 3 sons. Therefore his name was called Levi. And she conceived again and bare a son, and she said, now I will praise the Lord. Therefore she called his name Judah, and left barren. All right, so we see that God allows her to have children, and she ends up with 6 sons and a daughter. Okay, that's what Leah ends up having. Leah also gave Jacob the maid that her father gave to her, who bore Jacob 2 sons as well. And Rachel, at this point, still being barren, also gave Jacob her maid, who bore Jacob 2 more sons. All right, so up to this point, we see that Jacob now has 6, 8, 10 total sons and a daughter. Okay, and if you read down chapter 30, down through verse 24, this is kind of the account of this happening. All right, Leah having these children, the handmaids having these children as well. And if we get to verse 22, we see that God finally here answers Rachel's prayers and gives her a son. And God remembered Rachel, and God hearkened to her and opened her womb. And she conceived and bare a son, and said, God hath taken away my reproach. And it came to pass, and she called his name, Joseph, and said, the Lord shall add to me another son. All right, so finally we see God answering Rachel's prayers and bearing him a son named Joseph. All right, so Jacob now has a total of 11 sons, with yet another son to come. All right, now I want to get at least this part finished up. I should have time. So now we see, as Jacob has spent 14 years into dwelling in the land of Abraham, serving Laban, getting his wives, and now we see him being blessed with a family. We read down 25 down through verse 10 of chapter 31. We'll see as well as God blessing Jacob with wealth. Right? So after Joseph's birth here, Jacob starts to thinking about returning to the promised land, and he tells Laban here to let him go. It's verse 25. And it came to pass when Rachel had born Joseph that Jacob said to Laban, send me away, that I may go into my own place in my own country, into my country. Give me my wives and my children, for whom I have served thee, and let me go, for thou knowest my service which I have done to thee. And Laban said unto him, I pray thee, if I have found favor in thine eyes, tarry, for I have learned by experience that the Lord hath blessed me for thy sake. And he said, appoint me thy wages, and I will give it. And he said unto him, thou knowest how I have served thee, and how thy cattle was with me. For it was little which thou hast before I came, and now it is increased into a multitude. And the Lord hath blessed thee since my coming, and now when shall I provide for my own house also? So, he goes to Laban, wants to leave and return to the promised land, and Laban asks Jacob here what he should give him in the midst of this. And since Jacob, while he spent this many years with him, has obviously been very instrumental in just this huge growth of the flocks of Laban's wealth. His cattle and his sheep and everything else. Jacob has been the reason that it has grown exponentially, okay, because of the work that he has done there. So he's telling him, as we see in the end of verse 30, little when I showed up, now it has increased unto a multitude, and the Lord hath blessed me with it. All right, verse 31, he said, what shall I give thee? And Jacob said, thou shalt not give me anything. If thou wilt do this thing for me, I will again feed and keep thy flock. I will pass through all the flock today, removing from thence all the speckled and spotted cattle, and all the brown cattle among the sheep, and the spotted and speckled among the goats, and of such shall be my hire. And so shall my righteousness answer me in the time to come, and it shall come for me hire before thy face. Everyone that is not speckled and spotted among the goats and brown among the sheep shall be counted stolen with me. So Jacob comes up with this request, and he asks for the irregularly colored or coated goats, the black and multicolored we saw, as well as the irregular colored sheep, the ones that were speckled and spotted. And he wants the ones that will be born that way from Laban's flocks as well. Laban agrees and gives him charge over only the colored animals here. The irregular colored animals bore irregular colored animals, and Laban gives him this agreement. But if we get down to verse 31 and all the way down through verse 43, and we don't really have time to read through it, but we see that Laban agreeing to do this, and then Laban changing his agreement again in the midst of it. The opposite happened, and Jacob here still prospers even in the midst of this taking on. Now Jacob's prosperity obviously doesn't make the other sons of Laban very, very happy at all. And they reported to Laban what was going on in getting the irregularly colored animals instead of the irregularly colored animals. And Laban becomes very, very unfavorable. Verse 1 of chapter 31, he heard the words of Laban's son, saying, Jacob hath taken away all that was our father's, and all that which was our father's hath he gotten all his glory. And Jacob beheld countenance of Laban, behold, it was not towards him as it was before. Okay? Jump down to verse 3. And the Lord said unto Jacob, return unto the land of thy fathers, and to thy kindred, and I will be with thee. And Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah to the field to his flock, and said unto them, I see your father's countenance, that it is not toward me as it was before, but the God of my father hath been with me. And ye know that with all my power I have served your father, and your father hath deceived me, and changed away my wages 10 times. But God suffered him not to hurt me. And he said thus, the speckled shall be thy wage, and all the cattle bear speckled. And if he said thus, the ringed streak shall be thy hire, and then bear all the cattle ring streaked. Thus God hath taken away the cattle of your father, and given them unto me. So we see Laban's lost out on a huge amount of wealth. He doesn't like Jacob anymore. Countenance towards him has changed. He doesn't want him around anymore. Maybe he wants to hurt him in some way. So Jacob calls his 2 wives out to the field, explains to them exactly what has taken on, what has happened. And that also explains to them, because of their father changing the agreement multiple times, he has amassed this wealth, right? God has given him this wealth. And we see at the end of verse 9 that he specifically gives the credit to God here for the reasoning on why he has attained the wealth that he has obtained. Okay? So we see now from the beginning of this lesson, now halfway through it, we see a complete 180 change here of Jacob, right? God has been on the back burner. He was just a prince that was there that he knew about. God changed his viewpoint a little bit with the ladder and what took place and how he took care of him over the 400 and 500-mile journey. God has continued to take care of him now for several years, blessing him with wives, lots of children, now this a massive wealth that he has blessed him with too. And he tells his two wives that they're going back to the promised land. They have this wealth, they have what they do because God has blessed them. Alright, so next week we're going to pick up in verse 11. And we're going to see Jacob's journey back to the promised land. Okay? God has to protect Jacob from Laban. Jacob starts, as the kids say, feeling himself a little bit in the middle of this and has to have a wrestling match. Okay? And we'll see that next week as well. Right, let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for the lessons here that we have from Jacob. Being able to see, even in the midst of some pretty, let's say, difficult circumstances, but unusual and uncertain and just downright kind of done wrong in a lot of ways. He was still faithful to you, and he was still faithful to understand that this was just part of the plan that you put him on, to teach him some lessons, to bless him and his family, Lord, just be awesome as you do. Of course, we know that from Jacob, we see Joseph comes, Lord, and the influence and the importance of Joseph, what he was able to do, and his brothers as well, just everything that kind of comes before how he blessed Jacob and his family, Lord. It all stems the direction that you begin to bless when he began to obey. It's a lesson for us as well, because it's important for us to remain faithful to you, faithful to your will, and faithful to serve you.